Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this session of the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows. I will be your facilitator today, and I'm Ellen Naylor, President of the Business Intelligence Source. I've been doing CI for 41 years, including as a corporate practitioner and mostly as a consultant. I work to help clients develop an in-house win-loss system and also do some elicitation training so you find what you're looking for during a conversation. I recently published a book called Loosen Their Lips that kind of goes down that path, and did also publish win-loss analysis, and I've been a CI fellow for 20 years. Before we introduce today's speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors for today, and that is Proactive and Corporate Insight. Proactive Worldwide is one of the world's leading specialty market intelligence companies, helping top-tier organizations understand vulnerabilities, better predict market shifts, and plan for growth with confidence. Corporate Insight delivers competitive intelligence and user research consulting services to the nation's leading financial services, insurance, and healthcare organizations. As a leader in customer experience research for over 30 years, they offer a best-in-class research in a unique approach of analyzing the actual customer experience to help organizations maintain and achieve their number one position in the marketplace. So let's go to the next chart if we could. And these are the two leaders of these companies, David Kalinowski and Andrew Way. And let's get started then. Okay, so today's conversation focuses on something that has challenged our field ever since I can remember, demonstrating the value of intelligence, whether it's monetarily or confidence, whatever it is. Perhaps some of you remember when Jan Herring posed a challenge to this community to build on his work around measuring CI's effectiveness in a way that leaders respect. Few people took that challenge as seriously as today's speaker, David Kalinowski. David is president and co-founder of Proactive Worldwide, one of our sponsors, I might add, and has spent more than 3 decades building, advising, and shaping competitive intelligence functions around the world. He has trained thousands of practitioners, worked with over 225 of the Fortune 500 organizations. He's a CI fellow and has helped operationalize a practical framework for demonstrating CI value. The framework, ROCI, Return on Competitive Intelligence, was developed nearly 20 years ago by David and his partner, Gary Magg. It's trademarked by Proactive Worldwide. It was also endorsed by Jan Herring. Today, we're going to explore how it came about, how it works, and why it may matter even more in an AI-enabled world. Welcome, David.
Well, hello there. I want you to imagine that you're a chef and you've whipped up the perfect dish. You sourced the finest ingredients and you mastered the technique and you plated that dish like a work of art. Now, before it goes out, you sit back, you admire it, and then it goes out to the customer. The problem is that you don't get to decide if it's a hit. The diner does. And here's the twist. You may not know if they want some extra spice, a little cilantro in there. And the same thing goes with our business. If people, deliver this experience in the restaurant, the chef does not come out and tell you, hey, you liked what I cooked for you. I'll determine if I liked what you cooked and whether or not that 6-ounce petite filet was worth $60 or not based on the seasoning and the temperature and the ambiance and the service and whatever I decide that I base the value on. And we have to have that same mindset in what we do in competitive intelligence. You could deliver a robust, refined insight and analysis, and it can be completely well researched, great implications, but ultimately, if you don't know how your stakeholder values what you're delivering and how they're going to measure the success of what you're delivering, then they're going to brush aside your insights just like an overcooked steak. So, well, hello everybody. Good afternoon. How's my hair? My hair okay? Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Ellen, thanks for having me out here today, and I'm excited to talk about this topic and have the conversation and share some of my perspectives.
Well, David, why don't we do our first poll and kind of find out how organizations, how they're doing? Why don't
Yeah,
we
that'd
start
be
with
great.
that? All right.
Great. So if you guys could take a look at your screen out there and just and be honest, nobody knows who's filling out here, right? So take a moment, read through the questions. Does your company currently demonstrate the value of CI? Um, Take a look through the choices and pick the one most applicable to you, and we'll give you a moment to fill that out. Those of you that are multitasking, stop for a second and look up at your screen and answer the poll.
15 more seconds, how about?
Yeah, another 10 seconds. Make sure we get enough people to be able to respond, and we'll share those results.
Very good, Melanie.
Okay, Nisha, let's go
Michelle.
ahead and share those results if we can. Okay, take a look here. We got about 72
Oh,
percent
sakes.
usually might have an informal approach, but don't really apply it. But more than a third, don't have any kind of a clear, consistent approach. And I'm glad that it's not 100% in the first one. Otherwise, we could just end the call today, and I'm not needed today. But I hope that even those that have a formal framework will get some powerful takeaways here, maybe refine what you're doing a little bit more. But you can see there's a great need still to make sure that we are investing some energy and time and thought into showing our value. So again, you could click on the X on that and get that off your screen if you like.
Okay, David, let's dig into what you're all about here. I came into competitive intelligence through the door of sales. How did you get into competitive intelligence?
Hmm. Well, it's funny. I kind of fell into it like everybody in our era did. Now there's intentional efforts to get into CI, but I went to school at Northern Illinois University. I ran into a buddy of mine that was working with a small boutique consulting firm doing CI at the time, and said, "Hey, what are you doing these days?" And I said nothing. I had just graduated college and I had taken the LSATs. I thought about going to law school. I was accepted at UC Davis, UC Santa Barbara. I was going to think about pursuing a PhD to teach, poli sci at college level. And it's like, why don't you come out and, do an interview with us? Do you like research? I said, yeah, I was on the debate team. I, did research all the time. And so I went and interviewed, and I got a call a couple days later from the owner of the organization, offering me a research role, and that owner was Kirk Tyson. So I worked with Kirk Tyson International for many years. Those who may know Kirk. Worked there for 5 years in the role of researcher, analyst, project manager, then ultimately in business development. And after 5 years, kind of parted ways, and Gary Mag and I, who also worked there, started Proactive, and 1995 off of some cheap green patio furniture, plastic patio furniture at the back of a house I was renting at the time, and kind of said, "Hey, let's get this off the ground," and we did. And 30 years later, we're still thriving. So, but I loved everything about CI when I got in. It was something that was a little bit different twist than traditional market research. That's for sure.
So let's get on to Jan Herring. You referenced him in our opening comments, and what did his early challenge around measuring CI effectiveness mean to you? How did you decide to take that on?
I had the chance to meet Jan early when he was, starting Motorola's competitive intelligence capability, and which many of you may know or may not know, was really the first formal intelligence function out there. And he had written in '96 about the effectiveness and measuring the effectiveness of CI, and had in that conversation said, I wish someone to kind of take this to another level. I've kind of outlined some things to measure, but didn't get into too deeply about how to go about it and really what to do with that, And so, if I share just a quick slide here, after we had developed our framework, and this is an image of Jan, who those who don't know, and I actually talked with him a few months ago. I lovingly call him the godfather of CI, maybe the grandfather of CI, I don't know, but his work was instrumental to getting the first understanding that you can indeed, set some metrics in place. And so our ROCI framework, then when he looked at it and gave some feedback and guidance and he had a couple iterations, ultimately said, hey, this is great because this is a great way throughout the intelligence cycle to get users, those then stakeholders, and those that are producing the intelligence to make sure you're having conversation so that you deliver what is most important, to them. So Jan's work was the foundation, I think, of a lot of what all of us do.
Mhm. So, what's the biggest misconception leaders have about the role of CI? So we can kind of build on that to your Rocky.
Well, in my mind, I think, leaders still think you could just sit down, punch a couple buttons, and poof, all this information just shows up, right? And, don't you just do Google searches? Yeah, no, I don't just do Google searches. And I think that they think they have all the knowledge already, and that we're just purely a support function. And I think for many years, that's how CI was positioned, as a support, a decision support function. And I think it's much more than that. I think that we have to make sure that we're influencing decisions, not just providing background reading to executives, which is how some of them view it. So I think a misconception is that, it's not going to help them as much, as their own network of people, or that it's not going to really give them any unique insights because, I've been doing this 30 years. What are you going to tell me in CI that I don't already know? It's like, well, a lot if you listen, So
Yeah.
I think that there's just people, and I think another misperception is still every now and then people conjuring up the image of espionage, spying, midnight rendezvous, secret handshakes, right? I think we dismissed a lot of that effectively, but there's still a few that have never heard of what we do, and that's what they think about. So we have to quickly educate them on the realities.
Yes. And another reality, AI.
Yeah.
Is AI replacing us or is something else happening? What do you think?
I'd say no, absolutely not replacing us. However, I do think that leadership's perception that it can is what's eroding human value, right? Leadership's perception that AI can replace us. Tim Powell has done some great work in this area around knowledge, and if I may just share something really quick, this is a framework that Tim had created. He calls it the knowledge value chain, which I think is fantastic. And I just made a slight edit to it. At the bottom of this rung, right? Tim has talked about most of us are good at acquiring data, processing it. Heck, we might even analyze it, right? And here's where I do see that AI could enable this more. I think it can help us. It's not all the way there yet. There's still, I'm a big believer that there are oceans of data out there, and AI can help with that, but you still need a human to tell you where to fish and to know what to throw back. But we can use AI to help with that. But the human piece still is critical for the top pieces. That how do you take that knowledge and effectively communicate it, and how do you adapt to the personalities and the way decision makers actually make decisions, and how do we get them to apply the knowledge and create this strategy, and then you don't get the true value until you actually do something with it. Action's actually taken, and that's where I find right now people are lacking in our process. We're not saying, but what is that value? And how do we know? And do we believe it? And how do we measure it? And that's what I'm excited to talk about more today. So again, if people aren't familiar with Tim's value chain, please go look that up and
Oh, look that up. Yeah.
check it
So
out.
AI does not discern. we do, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, and I just saw a quick. I'm not looking greatly at the chat, but I did just see a quick question that popped up about who owns kind of the action part. So listen, folks, in my mind, it's not enough to do great work. We have to proactively defend what we do these days. I mean, and you may think, well, I've never had to do that before. My manager loves our CI group. We're great. It's like, yeah, until a new CI leader comes in or somebody that leads a function in which you're embedded, and they go, what the hell is this $500,000 or $1 million or 100,000 that we're spending on CI, right? So we got to be armed with that. But I think that the strategy in my mind, your job is to shift CI from being an activity that is reporting right out intelligence to owning the decision accountability. That doesn't mean you have to make the decision. Doesn't mean you own the actual outcomes of that decision. But it's up to us to be able to make sure that we define the value of intelligence before the project starts and that we then prove its value after the decision is made. And that's something I don't think we're doing enough. We're not defining what the value is before we even start. We might define the scope, right? What we're doing, what the objectives are, all those things. But that's different than defining what the perceived value will be. And then when the decision is made based in part on what you delivered, what's the real impact of the decision that was made?
Yeah. And I think the other thing we can do by being likable and curious, etc., is we can make other people in the organization very interested in taking action because they don't report to us, right? Anyway, let's move along here. We got to get to Rocky, right? So let's talk about the birth of Rocky. How did it come about? And let's go into some of that, David.
Yeah, so when we were looking out in the market and working with all of our different clients, they kept on having the challenge of having budgets called. I used to call the session "Don't cut me in my budget," right? And some out there who might be watching would remember years ago I had a toy chainsaw, that I would actually start the skit with, and we were cutting the heck out of our budget, right? And the reality is that people were doing great work, but then not necessarily bragging about it or boasting about it. More importantly, the end stakeholders weren't acknowledging the contribution it was really making. And so through our conversations with Jan, we said, hey, we got to fix this. And when we started to think about the framework elements, which we'll discuss in just a moment, one of the key elements was to make sure we are capturing on a regular basis, what the stakeholders, use the intelligence for, and then ultimately what that trickled down to in terms of qualitative or quantitative impact. And I think that, everybody on this call probably has 6, 8, 10, 12 projects underway, right? Some are just starting, some are just ending, some are in the middle, right? But we finish a project and then we're on to the next project. And we're not going back 6 months, 12 months later to see what was the real impact. Maybe in sales enablement that happens more because there's a bid that you're on and you win that and that you could track faster perhaps. But for the strategic type of implications, we're on to the next gig. And so we have to make sure that we're spending some time. So we decided that we need to create a framework that's simple and easy and flexible enough, whether in your market research or in consumer insights or you're in CI, that it would apply.
All right, so kind of let's go into the hardest part of calculating this ROI as part of your Rocky.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you think about that, calculating ROI is the easy part, right? Everybody, you don't have to have an MBA or be a Pulitzer Prize winner in finance, to know this benefits minus cost divided by cost, times it by 100 to get the percentage. The math isn't the problem. It's agreeing on what are the benefits. What are the benefits? We can figure out the costs. We know our labor costs. We know databases. We know platforms. We know if we hire outside firms, we know those costs, right? But the benefits, that's the tricky part here. And that's what we got to get better at being able to assess. That's by far the most difficult, component. And what I found is that when we have to even step back to go, why do we have to show our value? Don't they know? Don't they know that we're great? Well, we have to still build our credibility and our reputation and institutionalize CI. And then we do that, then we can start to get the organization to realize how it can make or save money or time, and how it can impact productivity, and it can influence thinking along the ways.
So, what are the core elements of your Rocky framework? You kind of were getting to a little bit of it that there in that last chart.
Yeah, so there's four parts of it here to dive in. So the first part really is, identifying the metrics, right? And the way to do that is we have to talk to our stakeholders. Again, it sounds obvious, but as we just saw from that survey, most folks are not consistently applying even a framework that they might have in place. So at the very beginning, we have to first identify the metrics that each stakeholder is going to measure. So if you're doing a project for somebody in sales, it might be about win rates, it might be about increasing revenue, it might be account retention. If it's for someone who's leading operations in a manufacturing organization, they might be concerned with, I have to increase productivity 17% and I have to reduce costs by 7%. Well, if what we're doing doesn't link back to those two metrics, why are we doing it? That's all they care about, right? So you have to think about, through conversations with those stakeholders, what are some things? And these are some things we've come across in terms of quantitative metrics, right? It could be everything about, hey, we need to grow market share, we want to retain customers, we need to save time, we need to make money, we need to extend our product life cycle. These are just some different ways you can think about how you can link your intelligence work to a metric. But don't dismiss the qualitative elements. This is an area
Mhm.
Jan and I had some deep conversations that there's still value in stimulating thinking. There's still value in challenging the status quo. There's a lot of value if you're helping to drive M&A decisions. If you are, effectively contributing to the plan. I worked with the CFO and CEO of a major pet food company years ago, and one of the things that they told me was, I'll know that CI has value when it shows up in the business plans. Where the brand
Mhm.
leaders and the functional leaders and the business unit leaders are actually looking at the external landscape and then feeding that knowledge into it, impacting their growth projections or whatever metrics, they're going to be measured on by the CEO. So these are some things. So that's the first part of the framework, which I think is really important.
I remember David, Tim Kindler telling me that his CEO valued him so much. What you were just saying, giving them ideas, uh, trying not to have surprises. He would have conversations with them because he had so much confidence
Yeah.
and relied on them actually quite a lot. There's really no number for that, but it was an incredible. I admired him that he managed to do that. He worked for a big company. So anyway, back to the
Yeah. No,
next
for sure.
step, step two.
Well, I think part of it is still making sure that we are asking the right set of questions. And I think most intelligence professionals have gotten really good at scoping out projects to understand,
Mhm.
what are you trying to accomplish and what are the key questions. And in fact, going back to Jan, um, some on this call may know, but some don't realize, if you're newer to CI, that he's the one that actually created the KIT and KICks, right? Key intelligence topics, key intelligence questions, extending it from national intelligence topics from the government when he was in the CIA, right? So if everyone uses kits and kicks, that's where it originated. But I
Yep.
suggest you don't use them when talking with your stakeholders. They don't
Right.
understand that shit.
You're
They
right.
understand business issues, business questions, business decisions, right? And
They
so,
understand revenue and profit.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that we have to get better before the project starts, asking a series of questions, not about the scope, not about what you want, but to help you figure out what the value is. So you're defining again, what decision are you looking to make? And making sure the questions that we're asking, then when answered, will help to make that decision. Second is,
Mhm.
so what goals or key performance indicators or OKRs, whatever you use, what will it support? And they say, I don't really know. And we're not ready then to start the project, right? We need to know. The third question before you start your projects is, what would make it worth doing this? It's going to cost us 200 man hours internally, or it's going to cost us $50,000 to get outside help. What would make this worth it? The fourth one doesn't get addressed hardly anywhere, and it needs to. And that is, what happens if we don't do this?
Mhm.
If they say, yeah, you know what? It probably doesn't matter if we do this work. Well, then why are you bothering me? Then let's not do it.
Yeah.
Or it'll be, well, yeah, we're making a $10 million decision here, so it's worth making the investment because it's going to, make sure we're making the right decision. But what if we don't do the work? Is an important question to ask to get the stakeholder to realize whether or not this will add value or not. The next question around, again, what costs or results could this influence? Not just inform, but influence. There's a difference. And then finally, how confident are you today in making the decision? Now, a lot of executives with egos say, oh, I'm really confident. Well, then you don't need to do the work. I mean, if you're already
Mhm.
that confident, then go make your
Mhm.
decision. And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll backtrack then, right? Or they'll say, well, even though I'm confident, I still need evidence to support to the board my decision. Like, okay, so there is value, right? And then, of course,
Right.
understanding how will this make a difference later. And that's
Yeah.
important, Ellen, because a lot of folks, when we deliver our reports, our intelligence reports, you're not going to see the value the next day. Except, like I said, there are some tactical things and some initiatives like sales where it can feed in to change a bid or to
Hmm.
position yourself differently to win. But other things, they might not even make a decision for 6 months down the road from what you delivered. So if we're not following up later, that's a problem then, right? So those are the questions
Right.
before, but I also
Yeah.
think we got to be better at asking questions afterwards. Now we
Da-
delivered it,
David,
right? Yeah.
David, why don't we stop here now
Yeah,
that you've
sure.
given people a taste of this core, and we'll do the after later because we
Yeah,
have another
sure.
poll that you put together. And I think now that they got a taste
Oh,
of what this
fantastic.
structure is, let's go ahead and say, when is the value of your intelligence most often recognized? Let's put that one up.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Got ahead of myself a little bit.
That's all right. That's why we're a team, honey.
So, when is the value of your intelligence most often recognized? All the way down before, after, or maybe it's not recognized at all explicitly. So, again, take a moment. If you're tackling something else right now, step away from that for a quick second. Look at your screen, please. Answer the question. Your input's important.
Oh, we also have a question. Okay.
Then, to shift, once you have enough folks, we could go ahead and share those results. Hey, Ellen, have you found that from your work too, people are challenged at sometimes not asking enough of the right questions before the project
Yeah,
that'll lead to understanding the value?
I find that's true in almost everything we do in competitive intelligence. I work in win-loss and I keep telling you should have your salespeople tell their customer or their potential customer, we might decide to call you after this to find out how we did. No one does
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So
It's
if you look
just
at the,
people don't think about doing things often beforehand, but
yeah,
usually they
yeah.
think about it after, but they don't always. And I also notice after we get these results, Carla has a question. Okay.
Yeah, great. So you can see from the results, about 15%, the work's really not explicitly valued or it's certainly not expressed. Later, in more subtle ways, 38%. And then, about half, either before decision made or right after. So that's good that there's some recognition, there's some acknowledgement of what's happening. So let's go ahead and close that poll and we'll continue on here. You said you had a question?
Carla Vavasori has raised a hand for a question,
Okay.
and maybe should we unmute her, or would Carla, would you like to write your question out here in the chat?
If she wants to put her question in chat, we'll come back to that. The quick pop-up
Why,
I
why
did
don't we do
see.
that?
Yeah, the quick pop-up I saw was, do those poll results reflect what I've seen in reality? No. I think I have personally seen a far greater percent of individuals that have not effectively gotten feedback about the real value. They might got, hey, this is really good, or this was helpful, or thanks for doing this. But to truly get the feedback about the value it created, I don't see that as much. Cliff has a question. Cliff, Kel, if you want to ask your question, is he able to?
Well, let me look at the question section. Q&A. I have no open questions on the
Okay, I just saw
Q&A.
his hand come up. So again, we'll try to come back to those questions, guys. We'll have time. Let me go if I may now then to the second part of that. So, when we're thinking about identifying those metrics, we talked about asking a series of questions beforehand, but then now we have to assess the impact, right? The second part of the framework is to measure what we said we were going to measure. It's just like if you have an annual review, if anyone still has those out there, right? Your manager tells you what you're going to be measured on. Well, if they never measured you against those, then what's the point, right? So someone has to actually measure against those. So now we have to go back to our stakeholders and make sure we understand, how did this change how you're thinking? How is this
Mhm.
guiding some of your choices? What decision are you making that you can attribute some of the success to us, right? And how confident are you now that you got this intelligence? All those things are really important, all along the lines of making sure that we're reminding them of what we're delivering is valuable to them. And folks, if I may say something here, the middle part under influence, where it says, how much of your decision was driven by us. If you deliver your intelligence report, here you go. Here's your intelligence report, boss. And they go, yeah, it's interesting. It's a nice, it's a good read. It's some interesting component, and they don't give you any sense of the value of it. Then one of two things happen. One is if they're sitting there going, yeah, it's okay. I don't know if I'll use it, but thanks for pulling it together. It's like either we didn't scope it out right, because how can I answer all the questions that you needed to have answered and you tell me it doesn't add value? Or we delivered poor quality, right? I guess there could be a third. Maybe we just delivered it ineffectively, right? We didn't package it well enough and deliver it, in a powerful way. But there's no way we could answer everything they're asking us to answer and to not have value then coming from that. So we just have to make sure then that we are taking the time to ask these additional questions, to assess the impact now of what it is that we're actually delivering. And you have to talk to your stakeholders to do that. Only they could tell you how it impacted them. And if they don't give you that input, which you should be setting up at the set of the project, hey, we're going to be coming back to you right after the project, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months later, and see how it helped you and the impact it had. And if they're not available or willing to do that, then we have to create defendable, believable, reasonable assumptions, something Neil Mahoney had mentioned years ago at a pharma conference. We have to create the assumptions then, to be able to determine what that value was. And that's why you have to work with your finance folks really closely as well. Get a financial analyst who can help you with those assumptions.
Mhm. Well, why don't you give an example of how ROCI is being used?
Sure. So so again, if you think about your competitive intelligence function, let's say you do 10 projects a quarter. Some may do a lot more than that, some may do less. But the idea is to have conversations with each of those stakeholders. Let's say you're in the manufacturing space, and talk with the folks in sales and finance and supply chain and operations, and understand for their individual requests, what metrics it is they're going to determine if what you deliver is going to be successful. Then it's having conversations with them during and after you deliver those results to see the decisions that they made and track the qualitative or quantitative and the short-term and long-term impact of those decisions. And then the biggest element is the third phase of what we're talking about, and that is reporting, right? Being able to actually report out a summary of those successes, right? And that doesn't happen a lot. So you could create what I call this impact snapshot. Hey, we did 5 projects over the last quarter here. It cost us about 400 grand to do those. Had a direct impact of $10 million, and so we have this 2,400% return, applying the benefits minus cost divided by cost, right? And you might be looking at that going, come on, 2,400%. But guys, we all know that our budgets and our cost to do CI is small compared to the millions and sometimes billions of dollars that we impact, right? But let's say you don't believe that. Fine, cut that in half, and then cut that in half. It's still a big number, right? And so then when people say, but let me see the details, then you should be tracking for every project what department, maybe you have a client scorecard, of some sort, but you know how much the costs were, we determine that's the easy part. But then by getting their impact input, then you could have a sense. So in this manufacturing environment, yeah, because of the intelligence you got me, we were able to save $2 million in our processes, or we saved 10 hours a week, and that translates to X amount of dollars. Or you helped us to win this deal, and that was a $10 million deal. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to give you all the credit for that deal because, the brand is great, the product is great, and the salesperson was phenomenal. But okay, give us 10% of the credit for the intelligence that we got you about competitors' pricing and their go-to-market strategy and their differentiators and unique selling points. And you won the bid because you modified because of what we got you. And you have a VP of sales says, yeah, okay, I agree. Yeah, you got at least 10% of the credit. Okay, good. That's $1 million then, right? And that's one project, you know. But we're not doing this. We're not consistently tracking that. Some are. Some are, because I know they're applying this framework, you know, but we got to get better at that so that at the end of the quarter, you're able to go out and share these results with leadership and brag a little bit about the impact that you're having because the stakeholders are telling you what the impact is.
Yeah. And how do you really train, I don't know if that's the right word, people in the company to be open to your questions at the very beginning of the project? Because so often they're really
Mm,
insistent on they want the results, they wanted them yesterday, the typical thing for projects. And how do you get them to kind of slow down a little minute and hold
yeah.
on, gang, okay?
Well, that leads to the fourth and final element of the model. We talked about identifying the metrics, then having to assess the impact on those metrics, and then reporting out the learnings from those elements. And the fourth part is creating a CI friendly culture, right? So to do that, it starts right from the beginning of making sure that you're educating people about what CI is and what it isn't, right? Getting that C-suite champion. And they don't have to be the person that's up in your chain of command. You might be housed in strategy or in marketing, but there's a different C-suite person who just loves CI who could talk to their C-suite peer about the value of what you're producing, right? Having those lunch and learns, educating people, and making it very clear that part of your process in working with your function is we're going to have dialogue throughout and after the engagement about what value you receive. Because again, if you're not getting value and impact, then we're doing something wrong. And we don't want to squander your time or ours, and we need to fix that right away. So making sure you're having the conversations. There are some folks I know that, like Michael Bernacci when he was at Duncan or Phil Britton when he was at Best Buy, right, that would brand their intelligence function. And so when things went out with that logo, from the CI function, they knew it was vetted. They had almost instant credibility along with it. Uh, but I think also just recognizing the successes, right? And getting leadership or stakeholders, whether it's in a company newsletter, whether it's a special announcement to go, hey, I want to recognize the intelligence team and those that contributed to the findings throughout the organization, because of that, we did these three things. That's really,
Hmm.
really powerful, and it doesn't happen enough. And so it's our role to make sure that we're tracking those successes. And then ultimately, Alan, this is the framework, right? This is what it looks like. It's got to be a triangle because every, good motto is simple and has the shape of a triangle, right? Uh, but really, it's about, again, identifying those metrics. Your stakeholder is going to help you with that. Assessing the impact, your stakeholder is going to help you with that. And if not, you have to create defendable, believable assumptions. Then we have to report that out, whatever frequency levels right for your company. Quarterly is probably best, semi-annually, at a minimum, I would say. And then being able to build that CI culture along the way. And when you do these things effectively, I've seen people get bonuses. I've seen them get more headcount. I've seen them be able to have a greater connection as a go-to as part of the decision-making process.
Well, why don't we do one more question to you, and then let's hear from Carla and Cliff. I'm not sure how we're going to do this here, but for some reason, I don't get to see when people raise their hand with a
Okay.
question. It's invisible to me, technology as usual. But I would like for people to have an opportunity to have their
Yeah,
questions
that'd be great.
answered. And we have plenty of time for it. Do you want to do the questions now or do you want to go to the
Sure.
next point?
Let's jump in. So I hope for those listening, this gives you some things to really think about. And those that said a third of you that you have some kind of a framework in place formally, maybe to look in at some elements you could refine, or are you truly implementing things consistently enough? And those that don't, this now gives you a starting point. Is it perfect? Is it the best thing? Maybe not. In fact, I've had people, Ellen, challenge, is this, I don't know if it's really ROI. It's not. It's ROCI. It's return on competitive intelligence. It's a new metric. It's like return on assets or return on equity. This is return on competitive intelligence, and this is how we
Mhm.
go about measuring it.
Yeah. So should we ask Cliff to unmute himself and ask a question or
If he's able to
Carla?
unmute, yeah, that'd be great.
Cliff, do you want to unmute? And we also had a question from Carla earlier on as well. Cliff, do you want to go first?
And maybe the system. Oh, they're not able. Oh, they're not able to unmute. Looks like okay. So maybe just have to. If there's any questions that you can put in the chat,
Yeah,
or
put them in the chat where it says webinar chat. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see where it says chat. If you can put your question there, or you can put it in the Q&A. I looked there too, and there's none there. So technology just is frustrating today, like it often is. And then you would send
Ellen,
it
did
to
you being an expert again, a veteran, did you find this framework uh, applicable and realistic and practical as Jan had believed it is?
I think it's good. I often don't have the privilege, though, as a consultant, and I've been consulting for over 30 years, for those starting questions. They throw the project at me and they want it done
Yeah,
yesterday. But I do later on ask, hey, how'd it go anyway? Just very actually informally.
yeah,
And I do find out some pretty cool stuff. Oh yeah, we relaunched our program for this particular endeavor, and thanks to your project, we sold out the next summer, whatever summer
yeah,
camp
yeah,
kind of thing. So you do hear it, and a lot of times it's a matter of just asking for it, even
yeah,
informally, and just finding, oh, yeah, we use this stuff. And a lot of times I will ask it 6 months or even a year later, just in casual conversation. And that
yeah,
often, for me, because that's kind of my style, that's often how I get the answer to, oh, it was actually useful. And in another case, they
yeah,
told me, oh, they had planned to go a certain route. And I told them, no, you do not want to do that. And often they don't want to hear, no, you don't want to do that. And they came back to me 2 years later and it was, no, you don't want to do that, even
yeah.
more so. And they said, oh, you saved us millions of dollars because we
Oh,
were
there you
getting
go.
ready.
Right.
We were getting
Well,
ready to sign contracts that we couldn't have gotten out of.
and here's the thing, again, we have to track that because if we don't, who will, right? And so I want to encourage those out there to make sure that, especially those who aren't doing any of this yet, like just start by taking a couple of your key stakeholders and understanding what it is that they would measure, what metrics they would determine if what you're providing is going to have an impact on their decisions. But then we have to actually start assembling, the content because again,
Yeah.
you'll quickly realize the millions of dollars that you have impact on that isn't getting realized or captured. And then when people come and say, "Hey, we're gonna go in a different direction," or "We need to redirect the intelligence budget," because right now, folks, the competition for internal dollars is brutal. And you might have a $500,000 investment into your intelligence function right now.
Yeah.
Somebody else wants that 500 grand, or they want to save the 500 grand. But you're going, yeah, but that 500 grand is impacting, $50 million worth of decisions here. In fact, give me double the money and I'll give you double the output, in terms of impact. But if we don't track this and then put it in place and to disseminate it like an annual report, so to speak, again, think about publicly held companies. if they had all these metrics that they track, and if they track them, but then they don't ever report out to the investors how they're doing,
Hmm.
what's the point here? Same thing here. We have to be able to make sure that we are demonstrating our value through these conversations. And guess what? Sometimes you realize maybe there's projects you're doing that aren't adding any value. Good, get rid of those. Stop doing those. We have to be able to control what we tackle that's going to have. We're not in the nice to know business, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is really learning how your stakeholders communicate and communicating to them in the way that they like to be communicated with. And that means not probably using CI
Well,
words,
I'll give you an
using their
example.
words. Ah,
Absolutely.
Cliff Calb has his question.
Okay, I'll
Joe.
get to that in one second. Let me finish this thought real
Okay.
fast. It's just
All right.
to build on what you just said. We had a client that does exceptional intelligence work. They would do, but wasn't getting read. They would even do really good at condensing things into one great page, right? You guys all know what that's like. And Mark Twain said, "Sorry, I had to write you a longer letter because I didn't have time to write you a shorter one." Right? It's hard to put something into a one pager, and the executives didn't even have time to read that. It's like really, but they loved movies. And so we
Uh,
encouraged them to create a 2-minute video summarizing what they'd learned. Guess what? They opened those, they watched them, they engaged, and all of a sudden they were realizing value that they weren't realizing just because of what you said, how they delivered that intelligence instead. So Cliff's question?
Cliff's question, what about adding finance to the CI scoping process to suggest metrics meaningful to the specific client involved?
Absolutely. I often say the best friend should be the financial analyst inside the company who works closely with your controller or your CFO because they'll understand how that person thinks about ROI. And they can also, that's where we get into the assumptions piece in particular. If the stakeholder isn't the one giving the metrics, because maybe they just can't, talking with someone in finance saying, "This is the project we're doing. Can you help me to identify what would be the right metrics to weigh this against? And when we're done, could you help me to come up with the conclusions of what the impact was?" I've had the opportunity in the last year and a half to talk to 3 Fortune 50 CFOs. And all of them told me, you know what, if the intelligence team came and talked with me or some member of my team, I would happily give them insight about how I look at this. They also realized that not all intelligence can be quantified and that qualitative impact is equally important. Yes, it'd be best to have numbers, but to have someone say, you know what, I was thinking about going in a totally different direction, but because of your analysis, we're going to pause now. We're actually going to pursue this avenue instead. Then you could later start talking about now making that shift. What was the financial impact of doing that, right? But initially, it was a
Hmm.
qualitative impact.
Yeah.
But it's a great point, Cliff, on
Yeah.
the integrating your finance folks in early
Hmm.
on if the stakeholder themselves aren't able to give you enough of that input. What other questions you guys have?
Well, I don't see any other ones. I know Carla said she had one, and maybe she'll have to get with you later because I don't see it in the chat. Do
Yeah,
I?
by
No.
all means. I mean, my final thoughts are number one, guys, um, stop informing and start moving to influencing, right? We have to, and that might require new skill sets for some of you, and how to truly influence and persuade people to take a certain action. So that's why I talk about the decision accountability. You're not accountable for making the decision or the outcomes of the decision, but we sure are accountable for saying, here are 3 options to consider, and I recommend B, and here's why. And speak with conviction and confidence. But if anybody has other comments or questions, you can find some of this in my book as well. Ellen, I think you've read it.
Yeah, I
But
have a copy of it right here.
awesome. But any of you have questions, thank you.
Oh, they
Uh,
can't see it. You've got your screen up.
message me anytime. I don't care if it's 6 months down the road. If you have questions as you're rolling something in this out or you're having other challenges, I've worked with a lot of companies on this topic, and I'd be happy to share, perspectives. Question
Here.
here. Oh, I just see a question coming in here. So
Yeah,
how far are
Carly
some
has
of
a
the
question.
benefits? So how far are some of the benefits? Short term, or 1 year, 5 years? I think that's a great question. Um, think about it this way. You can have short term that might be, immediate benefits, or the next 3 months. You can have things that are a longer time horizon. In the pharmaceutical world, if it's taken, 5, 6, 7, 10 years for a drug to go from idea to being commercialized, and all the clinical trials and everything, what you're learning along the way to say, hey, you know what? Our branded product is going to go off patent soon, and so we better be ready to launch our generic soon. So we have to think about what soon means. It might be 3 years, right, down the road, but that's why we have to make sure that we go back after these projects are long done and follow up with those stakeholders, assuming they're still there at the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
To see what the real impact is. Go back to Tim Powell's value chain, right? The impact, the value you don't see yet until they're making decisions. But we
Mm-hmm.
don't go back enough to see what's the recurring value. To let's say you helped in sales, and you win a deal. You don't just get the credit for that one deal. When they renew, you should still get some credit or acknowledgement that you helped to win the deal to begin with. But we don't do that. We don't consistently do that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes the benefit to what you did a year or two to, I think that was part of her question as well, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's just kind of think, what should CI leaders start doing tomorrow to better demonstrate value? If you have some kind of closing
Go.
remarks, and then we'll do our final poll.
Only closing remark is, your insights just aren't valuable. They're irreplaceable. And we have to make sure that we don't take on nice to know projects, that if the stakeholder can't articulate at the beginning the potential value they can receive, then we have to ask some questions and guide them there. But don't start the project yet until we know what the potential value is. So I would encourage people to go back to any projects that you finished last June and go back to those stakeholders, because you probably haven't since that project was over. Most of you probably haven't, some have, and go back and say, okay, we did this project for you. These are the results. Talk to me now about what you did with it and what decisions did you really make, and then what was the end result, outcomes, impact from those decisions. And so you'll either learn what the value was, or you'll learn if they don't think there was any, which again goes back to we now have to get better at how we scope out projects, or we have to improve the quality that we deliver or how we deliver it along the way. Because again, there's no way in hell that we can answer all your stakeholders' questions and not have it have value. We just don't know
Mhm.
what that value is until they tell us.
Yeah. And I think if you mix in the value with while you're scoping the project out, that's really the way to use this process, is have it be part of scoping the project.
Yeah, have it be part of the intake system and just set the expectation that in working with our internal team here, just so you know, we want to continue to be here to service you in the future. And the way we do that is to have stakeholders like help promote what we do, that we added value. So I'm going to come back to you when this is over.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about what you identified as the metrics to see how we did against those.
Yeah.
Are you open? Will you commit to that? Yes, I will. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, David, we have a last poll, but we are going to ask people
Okay.
that same question when they serve in the survey. And
Okay.
so let's let them do, oh, okay, go ahead then.
Perfect. There it is. So if you could just give us feedback. Did you learn something new today? Was it helpful? Did it reaffirm what you're doing, that you're on? Did it give you something new and different? So take a moment. Was today worth your last 55 minutes of your time to be on this call today? Did you get valuable information that you feel was practical and realistic and something you can apply in your jobs today? So would love to get your feedback on that. And again, guys, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have comments or questions about the framework or a version of it that you're creating or have implementing, or when you've hit roadblocks. Um, but we need to really make sure that we do this more with a consistent, intentional effort, not just every now and then.
There's a question about great presentation. Will slides be provided? We are recording this call and we will share through LinkedIn when it is available to you, probably within 2 days, even one
And
day.
and if anyone wants the specific visuals I shared, David K at proactiveworldwide.com, shoot me a note. I'd be happy to send those to you as well. So thank you guys for, the 100% found this to be valuable and either immediately applicable or with some adaptation. So I appreciate that. I can enjoy my bourbon later now, knowing that I was able to transfer some insights that you found valuable. So thank you all for your engagement, your questions, and the opportunity to share my perspective on this topic.
So thank you, David. I'm just going to mention to folks, about his book, and I have a copy of it here, which I couldn't show you last time, but there it is. Um, and if you want more charts, and actually he does share them in a very amusing fashion, so that's always kind of fun too. So, and I have some other announcements for right now for our future here. Our next webinar is going to be April 16th, the third Thursday of the month, kind of like we're trying to do at the same time. And this will be a fun discussion too, human and AI. And we will have Lori Young and Claudia Clayton on the human side, and we'll have Arthur Weiss and Ben Shearer on the AI side, kind of going back and forth. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and informative. And Eric Garland, who, if you don't know him, is just a rock star, very fun guy, is going to be our facilitator. And lastly, I want to thank our sponsors, Proactive and Corporate Intelligence, for sponsoring this. And if you're interested in sponsorship, you need to contact either Amir or Jeff for more details. And
Excellent. Well,
the
thanks, Alan, for the
last
conversation.
thing is I want to thank you. My goodness. I just want to remind everybody this recording will be available and we'll be posting it on LinkedIn. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.